So today we're going to talk about a big surprise and something I did not expect to be talking about 2 or 3 weeks ago at all. But here we are, because here is the pick rate of the Knights Valorant Freeze-Out tournament, and take a look who the top agents are. Now, in this format, right, where only one team can have each agent, 50% is the highest pick rate you can have. So we got Fade here at 49%, almost, the full capacity. But then the second place agent is Killjoy, and that might be a big surprise. So let's talk about Killjoy then, and whether Killjoy is a problem. But before we get into that, today's video is being sponsored by Gosu Academy, who are running another Valorant bootcamp with the 3 lovely faces that you see on your screen just there. One of them, of course, being me. But you'll also get coaching from Neil Zeno, who is the current coach of Team Heretics, and Anders as well, who sometimes does YouTube content and is also the coach of Version X. So 3 wonderful minds to guide you through to help you get better at Valorant. It runs from January the 2nd to January the 11th, where you will get also some 10-man sessions as well, where you'll get live coaching feedback in those sessions also. And don't worry if you miss any of the sessions, because they will be recorded as VODs, so don't worry if you can't make all of the days. But this is a great way to find people, who also want to learn Valorant, who want to get better at Valorant, for all skill groups, right? This is a great way of learning and leveling up and, getting better as a group, essentially. And, maybe you'll find a nice little duo queue in there that, you can then go on and play with and continue to get better with as well. So sign up for the bootcamp today in the link in the description or in the pinned comment, and start off the new year by getting better at Valorant. But it wasn't just that freeze-out tournament where you might say, oh, that's a weird format, so it doesn't really count. Here's a Nerd Street Valorant Lockdown Open 3, which I understand is a Tier 2 tournament, but still, Killjoy is actually the most picked agent at 70%. And that is kind of where Chamber was at. If we go back to like Champs 2022 and whatnot, 70% is kind of where Chamber was hovering around as well at that time. So basically, Chamber goes, and Killjoy has just completely filled that vacuum up. Now it's just Killjoy, right? And that is kind of crazy. Now, there is some weird things going on here with the map picks. As you can see, a lot of Ascent and Haven are getting played, which is perhaps skewing it a little bit, right? We're seeing more Killjoy because Killjoy is pretty meta on those maps. So there is like a bit of skew here as well towards Killjoy. But even so, if we just take a look at the pick rates on each map, that is where I think there's maybe a little alarm for concern, because we take a look at it. Okay, Ascent, yes, that's a Killjoy map. This is fine, around 80%. Haven, same thing, right? This was a Killjoy map before. Icebox, okay, yep, makes sense, right? This, if we go back in time as well, was a Killjoy map, and Killjoy's pretty good on that map. Even did see some play alongside Chamber, right? Absolutely fine. Pearl, okay, a newer map, right? But again, we were seeing a Killjoy trend upwards on Pearl as well, around 80% there. Okay, Breeze 0, Fracture 80%. This one might be a bit of a concern because we never saw Killjoy on this map before. And then also Bind only 30%. Now, one thing you might notice about these different maps is that the 2 that Killjoy is not seeing much pick rate on are the 2 maps that are leaving. And that might be a bit of cause for concern as well, because, with Split coming back, which I do expect will be a Cypher map, but who knows if it changes, right? Maybe Killjoy would be meta on that map as well. And then we've got the new map, who knows, what will be meta on that. We could end up in a situation where Killjoy is meta on, almost every map, which would be kind of crazy considering where we were, but a month ago. So that would be a problem, right? To have an agent be meta on almost every map. That's when an agent gets nerf worthy, right? And so, yeah, that could be a real concern. And so, how did we get here? What caused this to happen? Well, of course, it all comes back to the patch notes 5.12, where there was a lot of changes, and of course, most significantly, perhaps, the chamber changes created this big power vacuum, particularly for the Sentinel class, that it seems like Killjoy has filled. And that, in and of itself, I don't think is the problem. The problem comes a bit later on, I think, and a bit more with what they did with other agents like Killjoy, where they increased the lockdown health from 150 to 200. But not only did they increase the health, which made it, much more difficult to destroy, in terms of options to destroy a Killjoy lockdown reliably, reduced significantly, and particularly the Breach Aftershock, which was kind of the main counter, now that isn't there, because it doesn't destroy it anymore, that created a bit of a thing where, you know, the Killjoy lockdown now is very difficult to destroy if you don't have a Silver ult or a Brim ult. And so that created a problem combined with the chamber thing. But then also, if you take a look at what the devs did elsewhere, you know, they mentioned we've increased the point cost of agent ultimates to have large site-wide footprints. This to me seems like a bit of an oversight on their behalf, where perhaps they didn't quite understand that by increasing the health of the lockdown, the lockdown very much came into the situation where the lockdown should have been increased to 8 points as well, because of course it is an ult that has a large site-wide footprint. In fact, it's probably the definition of an ultimate that has a large site-wide footprint, right? And so they nerfed ults like the Breach ult or the KO ult or the Viper ult, right? All of these different ults got nerfed, but Killjoy's just stayed the same and got a very significant buff, and that to me is the thing that is causing the problems. And so let's talk about the key problem here, which I've kind of just alluded to there, which is the Killjoy lockdown. And let's talk about this lockdown, because this is an interesting problem for the devs to have to solve. Because if we take a look, for instance, at a map like Fracture here, right, the pick rate is now 80%. But if we think back to way before even Chamber existed, right, a long time ago, and a blessed time for us all, of course, but go back before Chamber existed, actually, Cypher was the meta on Fracture. So why all of a sudden has Killjoy become the meta on Fracture if before it was Cypher, before Chamber existed, right? Well, that's because of the lockdown, right? Because beforehand, what you could do is you could destroy the lockdown with a Breach Aftershock. And Breach is, of course, very popular on Fracture, so, you know, you would never really get a lockdown. You're basically playing an agent without an ultimate on Fracture if you pick Killjoy before. But now you get access to the very, very, very powerful ult underneath B. Right, you can go underneath the little underpass part, you know, put down the lockdown, and there is, you know, very few things that can reliably destroy it. You will get Brim ult sometimes, you know, Brim's a popular pick on Fracture as well, but other than that, you know, it's slim pickings for a lot of things, and so, you know, it's very difficult to destroy, and it's such a powerful lockdown. It's probably the most powerful lockdown in the game now that you can get it off, you know, semi-reliably, and of course Fracture has 4 ult orbs as well, so you can just farm them up and put it down. But this is where you get an interesting problem for the devs, because how would you change it, right? Yes, you could make it 8 cost, but would that really change it that much, particularly on a map like Fracture, right, where there is 4 ult orbs? Would that, you know, make that big of a difference? I'm not sure, right? And then also, well, you could go, well, let's revert it back to the old health, right, so that more stuff can destroy it, and that would fix the problem. But Killjoy always had this problem, I think, before, where it was just such a feels bad moment, right? Where your ult, if your opponent has a breach, your ult just does nothing, right? And that's just feels bad. You know, that's just feels bad, man. It's not satisfying, right? And I can't really think, maybe there is other instances of this, you know, very specific ones, but it was never hard for your opponent to just break your ult. And that was just, you know, not a good gameplay loop if you were playing Killjoy. You know, you'd just feel a bit useless. You'd feel, you know, disheartened because, you know, you basically had your ultimate do nothing in the whole game. So, you know, that is also a problem, right? Because that's not how you want that to work. You want people's ultimates to feel powerful. You want people's ultimates to feel like they have meaning and that they will change rounds, right? But also, you can't, it feels too strong. You know, there's kind of the other side of it, which in that specific scenario, if we end up in this meta where Killjoy, you know, on the 5 maps that will stay in the game as they currently are, Killjoy is going to be meta on those maps. That's too much, you know. But the lockdown is really the only problem, because I don't have a problem with the rest of Killjoy's kit, so there's no need to really target the rest of Killjoy. It's just the lockdown. So it's kind of an interesting problem for the devs to try and solve. They could just nerf the health back to how it was, but that might create a bad, you know, gameplay loop. They could make the ult cost more, but that might not do enough. You know, it's an interesting problem. I'd be interested to hear what your solutions down in the comments are below, because this is a bit of a weird situation.